If you've just joined us, just let me know in the chat section whether you can hear me or not. We're looking to get started in a couple of minutes. Brilliant. Thanks for those who have let me know. Hi everybody, so just as we're waiting for everyone to get on, I'm just going to do a little bit of an introduction for today. So I'm Alex, I'm from the Leaders Award team, and welcome to our International Women in Engineering interviews, and today we're featuring Raffaella Ocone this afternoon. Just before we get to Raffaella, I will run through what's going to happen during this session. So there are lots of people watching this event, so we've muted everybody except for myself and Raffaella for the whole event so that there are no interruptions or distractions. The first part will be Raffaella's presentation, which will then be followed by the second part, which is the Q&A section. Please feel free to type in your questions at any point using the Q&A facility as well. If you're on Facebook, this will be similar. If you could type your questions into the comments section. I'm just going to explain a little bit about what the Leaders Award, If You're an Engineer, What Would You Do competition is all about. Its main aim is to inspire young people ages 3 to 19 to look at the world around them and design solutions to problems. This can be a problem as small as maybe getting out of bed in the morning, brushing your teeth, or maybe a worldwide problem such as we are experiencing right now. And if you can design an invention to solve that problem. We provide opportunities for you to meet engineering professionals online, just like we're doing today, and to inspire you to think of ideas and start designing some of your own inventions. We've also got lots of available resources on our website at leadersaward.com as well. Without further ado now, I'm going to pass over to Raffaella. Hi, Raffaella.
Hi, can you hear me? Can you hear me and see me?
Yes, I can hear you. That's brilliant. Yeah, I can see you now. Fantastic. I'm also just going to make sure that you can share your screen, Raffaella, as well. I think you should be able to now.
Yes, indeed. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, it's going now. Yeah, that's perfect.
And I would like to go to presentation style, which probably it's better. So
yeah, that's come up. That's full screen now. That's perfect.
Does this work?
Yeah, I can see that now. Can you hear me, Raffaella?
Yes, I can hear you. So should I start?
Yes, it's yeah. Off you go.
Okay, so thank you very much for the invitation, Alex, and that you're primary engineer. I have to say that I'm absolutely delighted to be here today. I think that I want also to thank all the people, that are online and they're taking the time to listen to me today. So I'm Raffaella Ocone. I'm professor of chemical engineering at Harvard University in Edinburgh. And I would like just to start by saying where I'm from. This is a small town in the south of Italy. You can see the very blue sky. And this is the town where I was born. This is a picture of me and my brother. I think my brother was about 4, so which means that I was about 7. As you can see, this is the first thing that we faced. My brother was a male. He was supposed to drive. My brother was living here with my parents. However, he really didn't enjoy so much driving. He was really, or thinking about cars at that age, but he was really enjoying very much reading and writing. And believe it or not, but this is the first book that he wrote when he was 7 years old. And it's a book about Karl Marx, which I thought it's quite amazing that somebody 7 years old can just think about Karl Marx. I lived on the other side here of the village because I lived with my grandparents, and being really at the edge of the town, very close to a beautiful countryside, I wanted just to read, and this was the idea that I had of me growing up. I want just to sit under a nice tree, reading in peace, and I don't want to be bothered by anyone. So, however, I was also aware that I had to make money for living. And then I decided when I grow up, I will become a shepherd. So this was my ambition. I want to become a shepherd and have some sheep to survive with. Anyway, things didn't go according to plans. And my brother actually was able to make his aspiration true. And about 40 years after he wrote his first book, he wrote a book on Karl Marx together with another 50 books that he has written. And I found myself being actually simply an engineer. So how did I get there? Well, like I said, I think that in my career, I have to also think back and start from my education. So I think that the first time that I started to think about engineering was when I went from sheep to how to replace a flat tire. What do I mean by this? Well, I was 10 years old, and finally I went back to live with my parents. And my dad was not an engineer. However, he represented for me the real quintessential engineer. He was always fixing things around the house, reinventing things, and make modifications. Very often trying to modify our tools or fix our toys, or fixing our toys. And sometimes, of course, he fixed also my beloved shoes. So that was really, for me, something amazing because it was making me happy and everybody else happy. When it came to the time that I had to learn how to drive, my dad said to me, well, before you get your driving license, you have to show me that you know how to replace a flat tire. And I looked at him and I said, Dad, why do you want me to do that? And he said, well, because I think that you will learn to drive, but I'm not sure that you will learn how to replace a flat tire. And if you have a flat tire, you are going to be in trouble if nobody can help you. So start. And that is the first encounter, I think, that I had somehow with the practical things and with engineering. My dad taught me many other things about cars that I'm not going to tell you now because, of course, I mean, we have shorter time. It's for shorter time. Then when it came to decide what to do at the university, I decided to go to Naples and I decided to study engineering. Now, I have to say that I was the first female going for engineering in the town where I was born. Why did I do chemical engineering? Well, I was very good at chemistry, at math, and I thought, well, chemical engineering has to put together these two things necessarily. However, I didn't know anyone who had done chemical engineering before. I didn't know any chemical engineer, I think, but I went for chemical engineering. And of course, I mean, engineering seems to tick all the boxes. Also, the one which was very important for me, namely the fact that my mom didn't want me to do engineering. So definitely I was adamant to do engineering. So went to Naples, studied chemical engineering, and I was absolutely certain that I wanted to work on a chemical plant. However, things again didn't go according to plan. And what happened was that during my final year, like an undergraduate, I did a major research project, which really was fascinating. And my supervisor was really representing for me what I thought that a real mentor and an inspiration would be. So therefore, I thought, oh, I would like to be like him. I want to become a researcher. I want to become an academic. Spoke to him, and he said, well, that's good news. However, you will need to get a PhD, and there is no other possibility for you but going to the United States. Well, so this happened, and I ended up going for a PhD in chemical engineering at Princeton University. At Princeton, I think that I had another ingredient into my formation, which was how do I make things? So I knew how things worked, but I didn't know how to make things. So at Princeton, I started to understand how I could personally make things. And then I finished at Princeton, and I went back to Naples. That was my aspirations. I want to go back to the place where I started my education. However, I have to confess that the years that I spent in Naples as a lecturer were absolutely catastrophic. I wasn't happy at all. I felt absolutely miserable. At that point, I started to rethink about my career and thought that probably I will need to go and work for a company. But I also asked myself, is this academia or is this Italy? So the position came about at Nottingham University as a reader in chemical engineering. And I said, okay, let's try something different then. So I went to Nottingham, and I have to confess that when I came to the UK, that was the first time that I really realized what a real engineer is. What do I mean by this? First of all, I realized that all the students were very good in doing the design project, except me. I was not able to do a design project. I had never done a design project in my education. The second thing was that one day I was at home, I was renting a house, and my fridge was not working properly. So I called the landlord, and he said, oh, sure, I will send you an engineer. And I thought, that's great. In this country, this is what engineers do. Anyway, this chap comes and look at my fridge, and after a few minutes, look at me and says, oh, I'm afraid you have to change your fridge. And I said, this is bad news. So what's wrong with my fridge? And he says to me, oh, well, I'm not going to explain to you. It's a technical issue. You are not going to understand it. And I said, well, try. And he said, no, it has to do with the refrigeration cycle. It's impossible that you understand the refrigeration cycle. And I said, well, probably I can. I'm a chemical engineer. And he looked at me and he said, you mean that you are a real engineer? And at that point, I realized that the status of an engineer in the UK is completely different from the status of an engineer in Italy, for instance. Anyway, after that, after about 4 years in Nottingham, I got a chair at Watt University, where I became first female professor of chemical engineering in Scotland, and I've been there for the last 20 years, really, and great opportunities during all my career. Of course, I have been a visiting professor in other universities in France, in Baton Rouge in the United States, Germany, worked very extensively with my colleagues at the Chinese Academy of Science in Beijing, visiting fellow at the University of Bologna in Italy again. And finally, 6 years ago actually, I had the opportunity to work on a chemical plant as a secondment, and that was the Petro-Ineos at Grangemouth, which is very close where I live. So what do I do? Well, when I started my career in Naples, I started to study some very peculiar, I would say, materials. I don't know how many of you remember or know about silipati. This is a very interesting materials, and if you can read here, it says that it's the real solid and liquid. So how does it work really? Before I do that, I want to tell you another story. Yesterday, I went to the shop, and I was in a rush as usual, and I bought some yogurt. And when I came home, I realized that the yogurt was 0% fat, which I absolutely hate. It doesn't taste good to me. So I was about to throw away the yogurt when I realized that I had some corn flour. And at that point, I said, okay, let's do some experiment. And mix the two, and let's see if the video works. And this is what I did yesterday. And you see these very interesting materials that if you deform it very slowly, it behaves like a liquid. It does flow as a liquid. This is just made of corn, flour, and yogurt, okay? However, and watch now what's happening. If I apply a very quickly the deformation, it breaks as a solid. So this material, which is made of very simple ingredients, has these interesting properties, which are as a liquid or as a solid. And this is exactly what the silipati is. It's a polymer. It's made of little units, which are called monomers, and they are linked together through a reaction, which is called polymerization. And in this particular case, there are many actually non-Newtonian fluids, but this particular one is a viscoelastic one, which means that has the property of the liquid over a long time period, and it behaves like an elastic solid over a very short period. If you want to buy it, of course, I mean, if you go and buy these materials, which is readily available, I think, on Amazon even, you see that the composition is quite a different story from what I made. But the behavior is very, very similar. And that is due to these very ways, many different ways that these long chains have the possibility to rearrange themselves, forming networks. So, I also spoke about the corn flour, and the powders were extremely interesting to me. So when I went to Princeton, I started to get acquainted with the behavior of powders, and now I'll show you something else. Now, unfortunately, this picture is not great, but soon probably becomes slightly more clear. This is actually a container with some sand particles. And now I'm starting to send air through the base of these containers. So see what happened. So the little duct, which was under under the solid particles, now float. And this is essentially my main area of interest at the moment. And what I study is this sort of systems which are called fluidized beds. And fluidized beds have a very peculiar characteristic that when you start to send gas through the bed of particles and you increase the velocity of the gas through the bed of particles, at first the solids stay static, but then they reach a point, which is this one, A, where there is the so-called minimum a minimum fluidization velocity, where the bed becomes like a fluid. And essentially, the particles are lifted by the gas in this case, which is the air, and the separation from the particles increases, and then everything behaves really like a fluid. Now, and this is finally the applications where I apply everything I've learned during my career and the research that I undertake and the applications that I undertake at this particular time. We have been working with lignin, and as you can see, this is the main component of wood. but has a very complex structure, very similar to the chains that I showed you before for the polymers. When we burn them in absence of oxygen, it's a process which is called pyrolysis. We can produce gas, liquid, and solid. All these three components have interesting properties, which I'm not going to discuss now. This is very much used for renewable energy. But very interesting, we got involved at one point with the study of the replacement for the vitreous humor, the vitreous body, which is the liquid that we have in the eyes, which is exactly a viscoelastic fluid, like I showed you before, which is like a solid when our lenses are at rest, but then when we move around our eyes, this behave like a liquid. And these are all polymers. And then, of course, I work in the fluidized beds. Like I said, this is a big composter that it's in China, Lanfang. We have worked extensively on this one. It's a composter, and we have done some CFD, fluid dynamics modeling on it. This is a big piece of equipment, as it is the other piece of equipment that we have been working very much on, which is for fluid catalytic cracking, which is essentially the unit where you cut the long molecules of oil to obtain this middle distillates, for instance, or petrol. And finally, very recently, I have started to get involved with the Pyroclastic Flow. This is the second highest peak in Mexico. It's my photo from an airplane, and Pyroclastic Flow, the flow of little particles of lava and dust, is really fluidized flow. And then we are trying to apply what we have learned in fluidized beds into these new areas. And the same, this photo here, when you can see that for dry particles, you have very, very peculiar geometries. And this is the geometry, why this is created is still not completely elucidated. So having said that, I think that I would like to thank you. I have not spoken about another very important thing that I do, which is teaching, of course. I teach fluidization, I teach particles, but also I'm very much interested in the teaching of ethics in engineering. And of course, I mean, being tomorrow, the 23rd of June, I couldn't refrain from putting my little Lea, which she's named after Leonardo, who is my hero, and she was here with me when I was preparing the presentation, and I hope that this can really inspire girls and boys, of course, to study engineering. So I think I will stop here, and I'll be very happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Raffaella. That was a fantastic presentation, and thank you for sharing that with us. Like you said, I think we'll get to some questions now. So if everyone wants to type into the Q&A facility to add in your questions there, and I will read them out to Raffaella. But the first one I want to start off with is, I know you mentioned about going to different places, and you've traveled to lots of different places, Raffaella, throughout your career and also during your education as well. What was it like moving to a new place, kind of like the UK?
Well, I think my first shock was really going to the United States when I didn't know any English. So coming to the UK was essentially not such a big deal, I would say, because at the time I knew some sort of English. Of course, I mean, you know, my English is not perfect, but at least I could understand English. I could speak English. But like I said before, I think that the main difference in terms of education in the UK is that the UK education was much more practical compared to the Italian education for an engineer. We have a lot of theory in Italy, and not necessarily when we come out from the university, we are able to apply such a theory. While here, I think that the education is much more on the technical side, and our students are extremely good in designing, for instance, that I was not able to do when I started my career here. So in terms of academia, that was the difference. Of course, I mean, there are some other difference in everyday life, because, this is part of what we do, and people are different, which, of course, I mean, it has been a challenge, but I think that probably, to be honest, the biggest challenge was that being so theoretical, I had a sort of identity crisis, because the engineers considered me to be a mathematician, and the mathematician considered me to be an engineer. So at one point I thought, where am I? I mean, what am I doing? But you can solve this issue later on.
Fantastic. Thank you for that answer there. We've got one through from, I don't want to pronounce it wrong, but I think it's Rolake. What has been the hardest part of your career as a chemical engineer?
This is a very good question. I think that when you have seen my presentation, I've implied that going back to Naples and working in the place where I was an undergraduate was one of the worst times of my life. Essentially because I thought, I was coming back from United States, and the situation at Princeton was extremely competitive, was also not very easy. So when I went back to Naples, I had a little bit with me that sort of competitiveness that I learned when I was at Princeton. And probably, believe it or not, I was publishing too much for all the environment that was at the time in Naples, and I was not very much liked. And I thought that we had different aspirations. I was the aspiration of progress in my career because of my merit, while at the time the Italian academia was just progressing because you are old. And that was something that I couldn't accept. And that, I think, was the hardest part for me during my career, that I had to overcome that situation.
Obviously, we're doing these interviews for International Women in Engineering Day, which is tomorrow. We're doing like a series of interviews throughout the week. With it being that tomorrow, are you doing anything special for it? Have you done anything in the past special for it at all?
Yeah, in the past I have, of course, given lectures. We have been trying to link with pupils and pupils at school. But tomorrow we are doing something very interesting. It's international, and at Herotwat we have we have different campuses, more than 3 actually, but we have 2 campuses which are overseas. So one in Dubai and one in Malaysia. So tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, we are having a panel of women in engineering at different stage of their career. And it's an international panel between Edinburgh, Dubai, and KL. And we are going to speak about our careers and probably very similar things that we will say today. But essentially, we are trying to look at different stages of our careers and what are the challenges for us. Yeah. So this is what we are doing tomorrow.
Oh, that sounds really interesting. Very, very nice to be a part of that, I think. And I think, yeah. What did you say that would be on, or is it being kind of live streamed or anything?
It's going to be on Zoom, and everybody can be in the call. So I've been tweeting, and there is on my tweet there is a link for tomorrow. I will put it also on LinkedIn. I can send it to you, Alex, after this, and then you can share it with your network. That would be great.
Yes, that'd be great if everyone could watch that as well. That'd be fantastic. Talking about women in engineering, have you kind of seen an increase in women in engineering over the last kind of few years?
Definitely the number of women in engineering has increased, but I have to say that I'm a little bit disappointed because it has not increased like I would have expected when I started. I think that, in chemical engineering, we are still doing much better than other engineering disciplines, but nevertheless, I think that we are not doing so well. Now, the problem, I think, is essentially the perception that people have about engineering, and very much the role models, I'm afraid to use this word, but the role models that we have when we are children. And as you see, I mean, you know, even my parents, even if they've been extremely supportive, they thought that that was not a career for me. I was not going to succeed in that area. So I think that there is still a barrier there. And I think that what we have to do at the moment, we have to really make sure that we reach the educators and we reach parents. Because I think that, you know, it's the good example that parents can inspire, and especially these days when we spend so much time at home and we are much more with our children. I think that that's essentially the good way to get them interested in what is really an amazing careers with amazing opportunities. And of course, there are so many videos online now that where you show that, you know, it's not necessarily that you have to be a man to have a very exciting career in engineering. Yeah, but it is not what it should. I've seen an increase, but it's not what I would like to see, to be honest.
Well, hopefully these days and events can progress that even further over the next few years. We've also got a question here on Facebook. So what's the biggest and most interesting project you've been a part of, do you think, Raffaella?
Well, there is a project where I think that the results that we obtained were huge. Huge implication, even if it was just a mathematical theory, really. It was studying about reactions which happen in petrochemical industry. This was many years ago in the petrochemical industry. And we had an idea and we made an hypothesis. And with that hypothesis, we could solve the way these very complex systems of reactions and very complex systems of components, reactants, and products behave. That methodology was used by ExxonMobil. So it really has a huge implication in terms of practical engineering when you want to see what is coming out from a reactor, for instance. So that was probably one of the biggest things that I have done. More recently, I show you the big composter, you know, the one in China. I think that's an excellent big project. Absolutely delighted to be involved in that. We do all the numerical and the modeling side of it. But that's really, I have to confess that in that reactor, they still use coal. But the challenge is just how to use coal in a much more environmentally free way. And I think that, you know, all these challenges are extremely, exciting. Yeah. Oh, I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry about that. I think my mic just wasn't working then. Have you faced any challenges being a female engineer at all?
That's a very interesting question, because, you know, if you had asked me these questions probably about 10 years ago, I would say, oh no, I mean, everything was fine. But it's interesting because the more you go ahead with age, the more you look back and the more you realize that actually there were definitely some obstacles there. And at the time, I didn't want to realize that, because I wanted to believe in a world where there was no distinction between females and males. And if I look back now, I said, yes, there were absolutely challenges that I had to face. And the first one was the challenge that I had to convince my parents, yes, I want to do engineering, and that they didn't want me to do engineering. So that was the first challenge that I had to face. And of course, I mean, you know, the other challenge was to go to a graduate school at Princeton, where, you know, there were not many female at the time. And sometimes you have to be careful because, you know, because at the time you can also have what is called, you know, they don't want to discriminate against you. And so they treat you in a different way, which is not exactly what you want. So yes, I had many challenges during my career, but I had also many opportunities. And I think that the thing that we have to realize in our careers, that every challenge, every barrier has to be considered an opportunity. So we have to work towards that and make it working for our benefit, I suppose.
Fantastic. We've had lots of amazing questions coming in, and thank you for your answers there, Raffaella. Last one I want to ask is, what would your advice be to those young engineers listening or aspiring engineers today?
Well, I think that engineering is extremely creative art, I would say. And the first thing is that don't believe that engineering is just hard maths and making calculations. Think about engineering in the real world. So that's the first thing. Of course, I mean, I think that you have to become known for what you do. So my first advice would be get an idea and try to fight for it. The problem is that when you fight for something, I personally believe that you have to fight for the battles that you know you can win. It's not, and this doesn't mean that the problem has to be easy. It means simply that you have to be equipped with all the tools to win. So have your battle. However, don't get upset or don't feel down when things don't go along plan. So be sure about what you are, be very honest with yourself, but also, and this is a problem especially with women, don't be too humble, because sometimes women are a bit humble and they don't like to push themselves forward. So when you know what you are and what you can do, just go for it. So don't get frustrated when things do not go along plans. Just work harder if you really want that happen. And I think the most important piece of equipment, yes, it's like a piece of equipment. Yes, it's a tool. Get a mentor. No matter how old you are, no matter at which point of your career you are, a mentor is always somebody you want to go and speak to. Just to have a chat, just to see things from a different perspective. And the mentor has not to be I mean, mentor can be a man. My best mentors have been men. That helps you. So I think that's the advice that I would give. And be creative.
Thank you very much, Raffaella. I just want to say a big thank you to you for taking time out of your day today to do this for us. And I hope you enjoyed answering all those questions from everybody today.
Yes, absolutely. That's great. Great opportunity. Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you to those who have been sending in questions as well. We've also got our resources on the website at leadersaward.com. So use those resources on there and start designing your own inventions. And please join us for our upcoming interviews as well in the next 2 days. We have lots coming on for our International Women in Engineering week of interviews for that. So I think we'll end it there. Brilliant. Thank you so much for coming on today. Goodbye, everyone.
Thanks. Bye. Bye-bye.